The 1930s and 1940s were seminal decades for the acceptance and development of modern art consciousness in Iraq. During these 2 decades, Friends of the Arts and art groups were formed, and a generation of Iraqi artists known as the Pioneers launched different activities for introducing modern responses to the problem of representation caused by rapid modernization in the country, and specifically in the capital city of Baghdad. Instrumental in this process is the establishment of institutions such as the Institute of Music in 1937, the Baghdad Institute of Fine Arts in 1939, and the Iraqi Museum of Modern Art in 1943. The National Museum of Iraq, Museum of Antiquity, was established earlier in 1926. The Syrian-Iraqi educator Saad al-Husri, who was appointed the General Director of Education in Iraq in 1921, was a pivotal figure in constructing a national consciousness during Iraq's transformation from an Ottoman province to a modern state based on Arabism. Al-Husri later became the Director General of Antiquity. His involvement in both education and the museum granted him much influence on modern Iraqi artists who studied art on government scholarships in Europe and worked in the National Museum when they returned to the country. Thus, this period decisively prepared the context for the generation of artists that matured during the so-called golden age of the 1950s in Iraq. The group is often also referred to as the Pioneers of Modernism, a group which was pivotal in charting new possibilities. More importantly, artists of the 1950s had to come to terms with the lack of perceived understanding of their history of representation and its connection to their contemporary existence and reality. Despite gross economic inequality, social confrontations, and external political pressures, the 1950s became a period of potentials leading to better life. Artists thus were challenged on 2 overlapping and intersecting fronts. On the one hand, constructing points of continuity with Iraqi visual history, ancient civilization in Mesopotamia, successive Islamic periods such as the Abbasid and the Ottoman, while on the other hand, simultaneously partaking in the creation of new forms of representation capable of expressing their modern existence. Both were essential in creating art cognizance and interest in Baghdad, instigating a culture that appreciated and collected modern Iraqi art before official institutions were established. Consequently, Iraqi modern art would become an important identity marker for Iraqis till this day. Moreover, Iraqi intellectuals identified a gap between their aspirations and that of their public, particularly given the repressive political climate of the time. The establishment of the Friends of the Art Society in 1941 signaled an important development for modern art in Iraq and paralleled a more formalized interest in the arts. It was also the first officially established organization that was registered at the Ministry of Interior and was announced in the Istiqlal newspaper on March 25, 1941. The society included painters, sculptors, architects, and other art aficionados. The society held only 3 exhibitions, but played an important role during the turbulent years of World War II. As part of their program, they hosted cultural lectures and gatherings. Despite of World War II, the 1940s in Iraq were extremely important as years of exploration and learning. Artist Jawad Selim, would make several notations in his diary that he kept during the period. In his January 15, 1944 entry, he reflects on a discussion he had with a major in the British Army about the effect of World War I on art in Europe and the ensuing period of between wars. Selim is decisively very hopeful for a fruitful future for modern art in Iraq. He argued that Iraq's geographical distance from the war not only eliminated direct involvement, but allowed Iraq a more isolated and stable context for Iraqi artists who, moreover, benefited from selective interactions with a number of visiting artists, British and Polish specifically, stationed in Iraq during the war. He would add in a later entry on November 16, 1944, that artists in Baghdad continued to work throughout the war, and that, I quote, that Baghdad gave new cultural perspectives and spaces to the European artists stationed there, end of quote. Selim's optimism is echoed in Shakir Hassan al-Said's assessment that the formation of the Friends of Art Society happened within a short period of time following the Iraqi Industrial and Architectural Exhibition of 1932. To al-Said, that exhibition signaled an important turning point for the arts towards professionalism, marked by the art wing inaugurated by King Faisal I. The second step in promoting modern art and artists was undertaken by the group known as Société Primitive, SP. Formed officially in 1947 under the leadership of artist Faik Hassan, the name, they argued, expressed that every art is original, bida'i, as in intuitive and simple. The name was started as a joke, but then they decided to adopt it. The society had its roots in a collective of Iraqi artists who met regularly and went on outdoor day painting trips on Fridays. Started in 1943, their records indicate that they went on 60 trips, including few days of campings during summer, different parts of the country. These trips essentially allowed them a space for dialogues in the absence of an institutional framework. On the occasion of SP's first annual exhibition in December 1950, the group changed their name to al-Ruwwad, an Arabic word meaning researchers on the move, although often translated as the Pioneers. Arguably, the change of the name that launched them officially as al-Baghdad Group signaled a more mature approach for the group that was equally reflected stylistically, as it marked a pronounced move from the favored Impressionist style. Most importantly, what can be considered as an introspective approach that was practiced by the artists of the group prior to their change of name would change into a more internationally engaged one. Abstraction became a strong interest for the group. The artist Mahmoud Sabri was very effective in pushing the group for a more constructive, socially active role in their changing society in efforts to end what he called the artist alienation in his own country. al-Ruwwad continued their activities even after the change in leadership in early 1960s under Ismail Sheikli. If we think of al-Ruwwad as an effort of reaching an aesthetic collective based on the local and national environment through senses and friendship that formed new social gatherings away from the familiar and the tribal, and thus instrumental in the changing of the Iraqi society of Baghdad, then Jamat Baghdad Lil Fann al-Hadith, the Baghdad Group for Modern Art, formed by Jewad, Selim, and Shakir Hassan al-Said in 1951, comes to intellectually balance that endeavor. Selim, who was part of the al-Ruwwad Group, perceived the formation of the new group as a necessary step beyond what al-Ruwwad had accomplished. The post-war period and struggles that led to the 1958 revolution in Iraq necessitated new perspectives and directions. Arguably, the Baghdad Group for Modern Art was formed at a pivotal moment to begin a crucial negotiation between a novice post-colonial national consciousness and modernism, mostly European, albeit perceived by the group as international and transnational. The two main leaders of the Baghdad Group for Modern Art, Jawad Selim, who was born in 1919 in Ankara, and al-Said, who was born in 1925 in Iraq, were very different in temperament and background, but converged intellectually and ideologically. Selim, as I said, born in Ankara, he was born to a family of artists, and he had started studying sculpture on a government scholarship in Florence. He was there from 1938 to 1939, but then had to relocate to Paris from 1939 to 1940, and then ultimately, because of the war, he was forced to return to Baghdad. He would continue his studies after the end of the war in London at the Slade School, and where he would be there for the period from 1946 to 1948, and it's also where he met his wife Lorna, the artist, British artist Lorna. Selim returned to Iraq in 1949 and became the head of sculpture department at the Institute of the Fine Arts. Al-Said, born in a rural southern city of Samawa, initially graduated with a degree in social science from the Higher Institute of Teachers in Baghdad in 1948. He later studied painting at the Institute of Fine Arts in Baghdad in 1954, where he encountered and was taught by Selim. Al-Said would receive a scholarship in 1955 that lasted to 1959 to study at the Académie Julian and the École des Beaux-Arts, des Arts Décoratifs and École Supérieure des Beaux-Arts. In Baghdad, the charismatic and cosmopolitan Selim was part of a wider conversation that included poetry, architecture, and theater. The first meeting for the Baghdad Group for Modern Art took place in his house and was attended by his sister Naziha, his wife Lorna, brother Nizar, and Al-Said, sculptor Mahmoud Ghani Hikmat, the Palestinian critic Jabra Ibrahim Jabra, and 4 other members that included an architect. 2 years later, other important artists, including Ismail Fattah al-Turk, also a sculptor, and the ceramicist Saleh al-Amri, joined. The list of artists who affiliated with the group would include all the main and influential modern artists of Iraq, and thus effectively ensured that the ideas and principles of the group would be understood or even unconsciously internalized by Iraqi art scene. The group continuously affirmed that each member was to retain a unique style, but all aimed to navigate through the history of Iraqi culture to further develop that individual style and be able to visualize the country, the land, and its cultures in modern manner. Artists of the Baghdad Group for Modern Art aligned around the concept of istilham al-Turath to initiate a modern method of thinking about making art. In its simpler form, the term translates to seeking inspiration and motivation from heritage through an innovative engagement with it. Istilham is a concept that advocates mediation between the past and the present as a form of negotiation of heritage and tradition, with the aim to not replicate but project forward and realize contemporary aesthetics. Selim's understanding of modern art in Iraq expressed the problematic of the new art they had learned, oil painting on canvas following modern styles, and the past that Selim has perceived in the medieval work of al-Wasiti. Thus, he perceived of this istilham as a renewal of painting in Iraq. Their encounter with the work of al-Wasiti, who actually illustrated the Abbasid painter Yahya al-Wasiti, who lived in Baghdad around the 12th century and was most famous for his work in his celebrated illustrations for the book of al-Hariri, the Maqamat al-Hariri, the assemblies dated in 1237. Which basically is a series of anecdotes of social satire written by al-Hariri, the head of the police department in the city of Basra, Iraq, today's Basra, country of Iraq. Al-Wasiti's work came to the attention of the group when few images from the manuscript were published in the French journal The Illustrations in December 1938, with an introduction by the French art historian Lauret. The journal was brought to Baghdad by artist Atta Sabri from London in 1941. Lauret referred to the work of al-Wasiti as part of what he termed the Baghdad School of Painting. Al-Wasiti thus served as a model for the artists of the Baghdad Group for Modern Art. As such, for Selim, istilham to him was a renewal of painting in Iraq. In his inaugural speech delivered by Selim At the group's first collective exhibition in 1951, he declared, and I quote, "We dream that there is a dream that connects us with all beings that simply dream, a dream we call Baghdad." End of quote. In this statement, Selim invokes two threads, the local and the global. Selim explained the evolution of art and its role, and that of the artist in maintaining local culture while serving humanity in a global context. He questioned the status of Iraqi artists in Baghdad and located modern art in the margins. He criticized the new market driven by bourgeois taste that accepted the latest international trends in music, furniture, and film, but not modern visual art. He disapproved of the dominant mainstream preference of academic style and questioned the relationship between artist and public that would potentially situate modern Iraqi art as a point of pride to Iraqis. The group also published their manifesto with their first exhibition. The manifesto, most probably formulated and theorized by al-Said, spelled out ideas that would occupy the group's visual production. They said, "We thus announce today the beginning of a new school of painting, which derives its sources from the civilization of the contemporary age, with all the styles and schools of plastic art that have emerged from it, and from the unique character of Eastern civilization. In this way, we will honor the stronghold of the Iraqi art painting that collapsed under the school of Yahya al-Wasiti, the Mesopotamian school of the 13th century AD. And in this way, we will reconnect the continuity that has been broken since the fall of Baghdad at the hands of the Mongols. The rebirth of art in our countries depends on the efforts we make, and we call upon our painter brothers to undertake this task for the sake of our civilization and for the sake of universal civilization, which is developed by the cooperation of different peoples. May the heritage of the present times and our awareness of local character be our guide. May we receive support from the attention, good taste, and encouragement that we anticipate from the public." End of quote. The tone of the manifesto was revolutionary as well as ambitious. The group embraced the spirit of Turath, tradition, as their understanding of international art was rooted in their notion of identity, which they believed was their only claim to a distinctive creativity. This notion, in particular, is what connected them directly to the Iraqi society then and keeps their experiments relevant till today. The group held annual exhibitions and continued till 1971. However, following Selim's untimely death in 1961, and despite efforts by al-Said to hold the group together, their vision and momentum was fragmented, particularly as the 1960s brought with it different demands and directions for artists. Al-Said, who taught art history at the Institute of Fine Arts after his return from Paris, would continue to invoke istilham in his work and theories, as in istilham of al-Harf, that explored the Arabic letter, that led him to form al-Wahid, the one-dimension group in 1971. While al-Said maintained a notion of istilham throughout his career, his intellectual interest in existentialism, phenomenology, and Sufism would invoke different experiments. His work would move beyond abstraction to a realist deconstruction of time and space in search for the hidden. He was extremely influential in shaping the younger generation of artists through his teachings, theories, and various positions he held in Iraq. There is no doubt that the increased artistic activities in Iraq during the 1940s and 50s brought state attention as well. The Iraqi monarchy organized the first comprehensive exhibition of Iraqi art in the Mansour Club, west of Baghdad, in February 1957, that was inaugurated by the young king Faisal II. The selection committee included Jewad Selim, Akram Shukri, and the British writer Alan Tim. Many works were rejected That prompted the organization of another exhibition by artist Nouri Rawi, who was a senior student at the Fine Arts Institute, titled Ma'rad al-Marfudat, Salon des Refusés, and was held at the Iraqi Women Union Hall. A second exhibition at the Mansour Club was organized in February 1958. Ibrahim Jabra argued that the sweeping success of the first exhibition, during which the government bestowed artists with awards for excellence, secured the establishment of the Association of Iraqi Artists. The association was officially announced on January 11, 1956, in El Bilad newspaper. The association is still active till today. The impact of the Baghdad Group for modern art resonates till today. Their objective and work advanced a specific understanding of the visual as it would relate to a revitalized dynamic culture. Specifically, artists in the group engaged actively in reimagining Iraqi folklore through abstraction. They succeeded in situating modernism in Iraqi art on a progressive path that effectively helped Iraqi artists of the following generations to continue a recognizable visual identity. The group specifically initiated a radical charge for the development of modern aesthetics in Iraq that negotiated an explicit understanding of representation that would resolve the crisis caused by modernity and change. More importantly, the conversations they started, the concepts they introduced, and spirit of experimentation and innovation were to continue through the work of its former members and their students after them, as did the relationship between artist and the public's appreciation of modern art. To Iraqis, their modern art is a national heritage and a reason for pride. Thank you.